The sound of firm footsteps echoed through the room. President Trump turned sharply, his piercing gazes weeping across the crowd. The cameras swiftly panned, capturing the moment. He raised his hand, signaling to his assistant, "Where is my chief of staff?" His voice rang out powerful and uncompromising. Sergeant Ethan Davis stiffened slightly. He never expected that within mere seconds, his story would take this turn. Microphones reached out, and hundreds of eyes fixed on them. Their reporters held their breath. What will happen next? Is this just an empty promise? Or could this truly be a turning point that changes everything? If you want to know what President Trump did next, and why the entire nation was left stunned, stay tuned. Click subscribe now, so you won't miss the next part of this story. Under the blazing afternoons on the expansive lawn of the White House, stretched out with crisp white military uniform forms and medals gleaming in the sunlight, the military honor ceremony was underway. Flags waving proudly, solemn speeches filling the air, and the national anthem resonating with pride. It was a day of sacrifice, dedication, and patriotism. President Donald Trump stood at the center of the event, shaking hands with generals and nodding as senior officers expressed their gratitude. He exchanged greetings with officials, while cameras zoomed in every movement, reporters frantically taking notes, the whole world watching. But then his gaze froze at the edge of the crowd outside the official seating area. A Marine stood still. He wasn't slouched or distracted. On the contrary, his posture was straight, his uniform flawless, his medals perfectly aligned on his chest. Everything exuded discipline. Beauty Wash's eyes that made Trump stop. Hidden within them was an invisible burden. Something no all could erase. Trump had met thousands of service members before, but this time something was different. Dudley raised his hand to signal his assistant, and the security team held their positions without a word. He stepped away from the official area and walked toward the Marine. The camera instantly shifted to capture that moment. Sergeant Ethan Davis immediately stiffened as she saw the president approaching. Had been to countless formal events like this and knew exactly how they folded: a handshake, a quick word of thanks, and then the president would move on. But this time there would be no perfunctory handshake nor rushed pleasantries. Trump stood right in front of Davis, looking at him, not as a politician looking at a voter, but as a man looking at another man, assessing something deeper. Trump extended his hand. "What's your name?" Davis hesitated for a moment before responding. "Sergeant Ethan Davis, sir." Trump gripped his hand firm, holding it a little longer than usual. His eyes never left Davis's face. "You seem I've got a lot on your mind." Trump's voice wasn't polite but genuine, filled with concern. "What's going on?" Davis swallowed, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. "The camera is recording every small movement." He could take the safer route, say something polite and let the moment pass, but something in Trump's tone, the way he asked the patient way, made Davis feel that this time he couldn't brush it aside as she had before. He took a deep breath, his jaw clenching. "Sir, with all due respect." Davis bit his inner cheek, his eyes scanning the cameras that were trained on him. Rotated his wrists slightly, a subconscious habit whenever he felt uncertain. "I'm not sure if this is the right place to talk about this." Trump shook his head slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Wherever it is, it doesn't matter. Just speak." Davis hesitated. Again, the years of training had been drilled deep into him. A Marine doesn't complain, doesn't make excuses. But now the president was standing before him, not just asking, but genuinely wanting to listen for the first time. In a long while, he felt that someone in a high position truly cared about the things she faced. He inhaled slowly, meeting Trump's gaze directly. The camera still rolled, the crowd was silent, and the world seemed to be holding its breath. And then Sergeant Ethan Davis spoke. "I've served for 15 years, sir. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. I've been to war. I've lost comrades. I did my duty without complaint." This jaw tightened for a moment before continuing, "But coming home, that's the hardest part." Trump nodded slightly, but it wasn't the note of a politician merely waiting his turn to speak. No, he was truly listening. Davis let out a deep sigh, forcing himself to continue. "My wife, Sarah, used to be a nurse, but she had to quit her job to take care of her son. He's got cerebral palsy, needs someone with him 24/7. His thumb gently traced the palm of his other hand, a supt Lasignif restraint. "We've tried everything called. The VA asked for help from the state, but to even get in touch with someone who could help, we had to wait for months, and the bills don't wait. The debt doesn't wait." He let out a bitter chuckle, but there was no humor in it. Irene enlisted just to get a paycheck to support my family. But now I'm not sure how much longer I can hang on." The words slipped out before he could stop them. He hadn't intended to be so blunt, but now they hung between them, heavy with unsaid things. Trump's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker in his eye. Something deep, like he had seen this before, a soldier giving everything, then coming home with nothing left. Davis swallowed hard, forcing himself to stand straighter, fighting the bitterness rising in his throat. He wasn't looking for pity, not charity. He just wanted to know why. "I'm not asking for anything special." He said, his voice is steadier. Now I just don't understand why a man who served this country, risked everything for it, comes back and has nothing. The silence around them grew thick, so heavy you could hear the wind rustling through the flags flapping int. He breathed. The crowd shifted uncomfortably in their seats, camera zoomed in, capturing every subtle change in expression. Trump exhaled sharply, his gaze dropping. You mean you did your duty, and the government turned its back on you? You? Davis didn't blink, his gaze unwavering. Yes, sir, Davis responded firmly. They stood frozen for what felt like an eternity around them. The crowd, the press, the aides, all of them could feel the weight of the truth. Just exposed, it was raw, unfiltered, and the space seemed to sag with it. Trump tilted his head slightly, glancing at this team. A flash of annoyance crossed his face, but only for an instant before it was replaced by determined resolve. My chief of staff, his voice rang out sharp, like a knife. Cutting through the silence, an aide rushed off. Davis blinked. What was happening? He had been around long enough to know how this worked. Politicians say they care, make some vague promises, and then leave, but this time something was different. Trump turned back, his voice low, but certain. We fixed this for the first time in many years. A feeling that Davis had tried to suppress for so long suddenly resurfaced. Hope. The air felt thick as a White House aide hurried off. They were expecting a dull ceremony, were suddenly electrified. Microphones reaching out, camera assuming, and news producers whispered urgently into earpieces, scrambling. Something had just happened, something that wasn't part of the script. Davis shelled himself with the rigid posture of a soldier, but his mind was racing. He had expected a handshake, a few polite words of thanks. Not this, not the President of the United States right in front of everyone, challenging an entire system. Trump crossed his arms, eyeing Davis sharply, cold but keen. You said you reached out to the VA. His voice wasn't loud, but each word felt like a blade cutting through the air. How long did it take to get a response? Davis's jaw tightened. 8 months, Siren Devon. Then they told us they had too many cases piling up. A ripple of shock spread through the crowd. 8 months. Some guests shifted uneasily in their seats. Reporters leaned forward. Even a few military officers seemed momentarily taken aback. Trump exhaled sharply, his breath tightening in his chest like a storm about to break. This isn't just incompetence, this is an insult. His words didn't just cut through the murmurs, they pierced through the layers of politics, raw and unforgiving. You have billions for foreign aid, billions for useless government programs, and you're telling me we can't take care of the people who fought for this country? The murmurs grew louder. A few steps away, David Palmer, Trump's chief of staff, appeared, still catching his breath. Mr. President, Trump didn't take his eyes off Davis. This soldier has been abandoned. His son has cerebral palsy. His wife had to quit their job. The VA has done nothing. Palmer hesitated. Sir, Trump raised his hand, cutting him off. There is no excuse. I want this file on my desk today. His voice was cold, leaving nor. For argument, I want a full report on all the delayed cases. Every soldier, every Marine treated this way by the system. I want to see every number, every name, every file by midnight tonight. Palmer nodded firmly and quickly backed away, pulling out his phone. Davis stood still. His body remained rigid, air flecks of military discipline, but inside everything was shaking. For years, he had been buried under bureaucratic red tape, abandoned by a system that was too slow, too indifferent. Yet in less than 2 minutes, the president had made the entire machine move. Trump turned back to the reporters, gathering his voice clear and resolute. We say we support our troops, we like to say it, but what does it mean if them come home and face this? His voice rang out, each word striking with the force of an unanswerable declaration. If a soldier is willing to sacrifice his life for this country, then this country damn well better make sure they're taken care of. When they come home, his words made the air heavy. Some reporters, even those who were accustomed to questioning him, had to pause, because this wasn't politics, this was personal. Trump turned to look at Davis, his gaze hard. You say you didn't ask for help. Well, because you didn't deserve to. He extended his hand, and added, I don't forget those who've helped me. We'll fix this today. Davis stood for a moment, his hand stiff, hadn't need to think for long before reaching out and shaking Trump's hand. It meant little. He was used to empty gestures, but this time the handshake felt different, carried a deeper meaning he couldn't ignore. And as the press rushed in to capture the moment, one thing became clear. This story was just beginning. As the handshake took place, the journalists lost control. Flashing cameras went off in rapid succession, reporters shouting over each other, news producers hurry. Detail broadcast. This moment lived. The military appreciation event abruptly became something much bigger. Mr. President, do you think this is a political stunt? Will this actually lead to change, or is it just a public spectacle? Where will the VA budget go? Trump still held Davis' hand, turning toward the crowd of reporters. Without letting go, his voice cut through the chaos, cold but powerful. I don't care how this looks. His eyes locked onto one reporter. I care about results. This soldier served the country. His family is suffering, and I won't let bureaucrats bury this in Per work, while his chilled suffers, their porters stood frozen for a moment, just long enough for the weight of his words to settle, then immediately returned to their work. Every major news outlet coverage commentators rushed to analyze what had just happened. Some called it strong leadership, a sign that Trump was taking real action. Others thought it was a carefully calculated PR stunt designed to win voter support in his re-election campaign. Capital News rant, the headline: Trump takes the fight to veterans, demands immediate VA reform, Arlington TV count. Read, Trump assists struggling Marines as political tools. Is this real reform or just a show? MSNBC hosted a debate asking whether this would lead to real change or fade as a fleeting moment of attention. But beyond the walls of the media, something else was happening. For the first time in years, veterans across the country began to speak up. Veteran Ryan Gonzalez tweeted, "Sergeant Davis is not alone. I fought with the VA for over a year just to get approval for my PTSD treatment. This system is broken." Malins, the widow of a Navy veteran, shared a heartbreaking post about her late husband who died waiting for medical care. The VA didn't just neglect them, it killed him. In just a few hours, hashtags like #FixVA. Veterans deserve better started trending nationwide. While social media erupted, a storm was quietly forming at the VA headquarters. Senior officials were panicking. Calls from the White House flooded in, and high-level managers were summoned for an emergency meeting that evening. The pressure was mounting, and noon could escape it mean. While in the house in Riverside, Sergeant Davis sat at the kitchen table watching the news with his wife, Sarah. Since the video aired, she hadn't said much, but now where fingers gripped his hand tightly, her face was unreadable. But Reyes couldn't hide her worry. "Do you realize what you just started?" She whispered, her voices off, but betraying the tension. Davis' breath heavier than the last. "I didn't start anything. I just spoke the truth." Sarah shook her head, her gaze firm and resolute. "No, Davis, you did what none else could do. You made them listen." Her voice is often just enough for him to hear. "You made them listen." While the nation debated, veterans found their voices, and an underground battle began. This battle could be the turning point for real change, or it could destroy everything before it. Even begins the video of Trump and Sergeant Davis went viral overnight. It wasn't just political junkies watching, it was everyone. The video appeared on morning news programs, analyzed in commentaries, and dominated online discussions. Cable networks scrambled for control of the Capital News called it the moment. Washington finally paid attention to veterans. Arlington TV labeled it a well-orchestrated political stunt. MSNBC wondered whether this would truly lead to change or remain just a fleeting moment. But beyond the TV screens and the headlines, nothing else was happening. Veterans, hundreds of thousands of them, began speaking up on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The stories flooded in like a waterfall. Marine veteran Grant Morgan shared, "I was injured in my spine and had to request medical leave. It took 2 years for the VA to approve surgery. We treated like disposable objects." The widow of a National Guard soldier, Hannah Brooks, posted a series of articles about her late husband who committed suicide after 60 months of waiting for psychological care. "I begged them to see me husband sooner, plead with them, but they told us to be patient. Within 48 hours. The hashtags, the fix when veterans deserve better, had taken the #1 spot nationwide for the first time in years. Veterans weren't just complaining in silence, they were standing together at the VA headquarters. Panic spread. An emergency nighttime meeting was held. The room was filled with officials, bureaucrats, and political aides, all searching for a solution. "We need a statement," one official said, sweat beading on his forehead under the fluorescent lights. "We need to say we're addressing this," another replied, his tone more harsh. "Address what the president is calling for, full reform. We're facing a national storm, and veterans are calling us criminal. Do you think a press release will end this silence?" No one had an answer, because the truth was the problem wasn't with the media, it was with the system's structural failure. And now the whole country knew it. Meanwhile, at the White House, Trump's desk in the Oval Office was piled with veterans' files. Some were stories like Davis's months, even years of waiting. Others were worse. Veterans who had died while waiting for care, families who lost everything fighting the system. Trump leaned back in his chair, flipping through a file, then shook his head. "Worse than it hot. David Palmer, high Chief of Staff, stiffened. The VA system has been broken for years. Too many procedures, too much money wasted." Trump's finger tapped on the desk, his face tense. "Who's responsible for this mess?" Palmer hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Theoretically, the VA secretary," but Trump cut him off immediately. "Fire him." Palmer sighed. "Mr. President, firing a cabinet member will create a storm within the administration. It will cause a strong backlash." Trump's gaze didn't waver. "Good, maybe those waves will wake people up the next morning." The news Brump fired the VAC. Criterion, a shocking move promising immediate reform. The media exploded. Some called it a reckless move, while others saw a strong leadership. But in the veteran community, their action was different. For the first time In a long while they felt something real, not just words returning home. To Davis's place, he sat down on the sofa, his eyes fixed on the phone screen, as the messages kept pouring in. The glow from the screen illuminated his face, and his eyes reflected sheer exhaustion. There were thank you messages from his Marine Corps comrades, interview invitations, from journalists, but there were also threats, anonymous mails, phone calls accusing him of being a pawn, a traitor. Earlier, his lips pressed tightly together, teeth clenched. He had faced fire on the battlefield, but this was different. Sarah sat beside him, her arms crossed, watching him intently. "You're not reading those, are you?" Davis didn't answer. She sighed gently, taking his hand. "Listen to him. You didn't ask for this. I know that, but you've started something that no one else had the chance to do. You've made them listen." Her voice softened. "You've made them pay attention." Reaching for his phone, a call came in from the White House. Davis sighed. He knew what was coming. "Yes, sir," he answered. Trump's voice came through, direct and firm. "I need you in Washington tomorrow." Davis hesitated. "Sir, Trump cut him off immediately. "No excuses. I want you in the room when we're formed. The VA, you started this fight, and you're going to help me finish it." His heart pounded in his chest, each beat ringing out like a drum. He was just a Marine, not a politician, but now giving up was not an option as she boarded the planet the next morning. One thing was clear in his mind: this was no longer just his story. It was the story of every forgotten veteran. This time, they wouldn't be ignored. This story is a powerful reminder of the strength found in courage and the ability to challenge an entire system when we stand up for what is right. If I were Donald Trump, what would you do in this situation? Have you ever had to fight for the values you believe in, knowing the road ahead would be difficult? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice could be the spark that inspires real change. If this story resonated with you, don't hesitate to share it with your friends and loved ones. Together, we can spread the message of justice and responsibility. Thank you for watching and supporting. Let's take meaningful steps, no matter how small, toward building a fair and respectful society. Don't forget to follow our upcoming videos as we continue to explore more inspiring stories. Wishing you strength, success, and unwavering determination. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding.